less inequality, just in a moral way, but I'm curious, you were saying that in France, the marginal tax rates have kept inequality less than in the United States. So is the economy of France doing it all well? How does this work for the general growth of the country and the citizens getting jobs and those kind of good things?
There's no evidence to suggest that marginal tax rates, even at the 70% level, have any impact on economic growth. The rates that some of you might have been familiar with were those in, say, the 70s and 80s in Scandinavian countries in particular that did approach 100% and led to a lot of obvious tax avoidance and popular singing groups moving abroad. But those cases aside, there's not much evidence to suggest that even at the 70% level, which is where we used to be in the United States pre-Reagan, has any effect on economic growth.
So is there any solution, I mean, to grow the economy and make it more equal?
If you look at on my graphs that I put up, which I'd be happy to share with you, the areas in which we move towards more income equality in the United States in recent periods, it is during the Clinton administration when you had the combination both of rises in marginal tax rates at the top level and also a full employment economy. And those are things that we all should be for, I think.
Thanks, folks. I have to leave.
Since vested interest groups run the country, what hope is there that through politics we can change things in our favor?
I don't mean to be entirely facetious in my answer, but I'll say that since there are only about 85 people, it seems like we might be able to overpower them. Well, we got a pretty good security.
I have a practical question, but first I just want to mention to someone that the most vibrant economic period in our history was the post-World War II boom, which started with 1% tax rate and never went below 70% tax rate. So high marginal tax rates don't cripple the economy. I have a very practical question for Professor Metzger. You mentioned that those slides would be available somewhere so we can follow the links. I didn't get where we can look to find those slides.
Just email me, or if it's most convenient, I'll just pass them on to Rhoda and you can get them from her.
It seems to me when there's talk of reducing inequality, it's characterized as redistributing income. But the situation we're in now, with all of the recent income gains going to the top 1% or perhaps less, that's been a type of redistribution of income due to specific policies and rules. You care to comment on that?
So certainly the great gains that we've seen in the 1/10 of 1% are not entirely due to changes in policy. I mean, the reductions in marginal tax rates, the reductions in the estate tax have happened much more slowly, and these are trends that you can see have been in place for 30 or 40 years at this point. So underlying some of these great growths in concentration of wealth and income are factors that we might lump under the general label of globalization. And Piketty has some good examples of this, which I might have you look at. But you can imagine, suppose you're a popular rock group in Sweden and you sell to everybody in Sweden, but then there's a cultural phenomenon that enables music now to be heard all around the world. Well, then that same Swedish pop group can now sell albums throughout the entire world, and they're going to become 10 times or 20 times as rich as they were before. So this globalization of consumer phenomenon and also of finance has contributed to concentrations of income that and wealth that we might not have previously thought possible. And that's why we need new policies to think about how to deal with it.
You asked the question I was trying to ask, but much more clearly.
There's always been a segment of the population that's extremely greedy, and listening to what the three of you said, I wonder, is it that finally they're winning and it's game over, or which is unfortunately the impression I got. Or is this part of a bigger picture of swinging pendulum and other things going on in the economy? I mean, back in the 1800s with railroads across the country, and all of a sudden you needed national banks, and there were transitions then, and then there were, you mentioned the 1920s, and the wealthy leveraged and leveraged again and leveraged again until 1929, and then there was an adjustment. And so are we talking about adjustments to greater things going on in the economy, or are we talking about game over, let's go somewhere else?
Are you thinking of extraplanetal travel or something? Planetary travel?
Well, I think Americans are a little schizophrenic on this topic. So we like to imagine that if you work hard and you create a new product or whatever, build a better mousetrap, the world will be the path to your door kind of thing. So we sort of sanctify, the Steve Jobs of the world, these great innovators, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, whatever. We love people like that. We glorify them. We shower them with media attention and vast wealth. And there are great sort of national leaders. There are prized national possession, these people, and we glorify these innovators. So on the one hand, and I think this helps explain why, again, we're not in the streets and there's not more, why we're so tolerant of this income inequality is because secretly I think we all hope that if not us, if it's passed us by, maybe our children or our grandchildren will one day, create, Facebook or whatever, drop out of Harvard and be worth $20 billion. And that is a sort of, that's unfortunately part of the American dream. We've all sort of harbor that in our DNA. If not for us, maybe our children or our grandchildren. And I think that if we sort of push back too hard on this notion of income inequality, then that somehow that notion of what makes America so unique in the world, and it really does. I mean, we, in many ways, as stratified as we've become, and the differences between the 1/10 of 1% and the 1% and then the rest of us, and Mitt Romney's 43% and all that, we're actually there's a lot of mobility between classes, and maybe there's less than there used to be, but in Europe and France and England, I mean, in caste systems in India, once you're in that group, you're stuck, and I think in many regards, and I think one of the things that makes America so appealing is that there is this theoretical mobility between classes. So we don't want to push too hard on somehow doing something that would curtail that dream for either us or our children of the next Steve Jobs coming along, in his garage in Palo Alto.
We have time for one more question, maybe, Rody? You may have to come down here. I know that the microphone's going to reach that far.
Let me try. There's sort of two edges to this question, two hands. If there's the 99 and 1, I guess there's the 53 and the 47. There's the myth of trickle down, which is almost like the 97% of scientists thinking or agreeing that there is climate change and 3% aren't sure or disagree. Isn't there a consensus that trickle-down economics doesn't work in terms of fostering economic growth based on historical economic patterns and statistics and correlations? And then on the other side, why aren't we all so pissed off, not that necessarily we're going into the streets, but why do people who are making 25 or 50 or 75 or 100,000 and work damn hard at 1, 2, or 3 jobs, and many of them work hard in schools to get decent jobs, why aren't they going all the way up to the 90 or 95 or 97 or 99%? Why are they still increasingly drawn to a party that glorifies the 1% or the 5%? Why do so many, it's not just the middle class, why even the upper middle class, why do they continue to act like Joe the plumber, like they're the next one in?
I mean, I guess it gets back to this schizophrenia that we have. I mean, we really are again, we aspire, there's that dream, it's really part of our DNA, the American dream. And it evolves around, having the chance to make $1 billion if we want. I mean, I was yesterday in Las Vegas at this hedge fund conference, and the guy on the stage, one of the, it was incredible, trust me. But one of the people on the stage was this guy David Tepper, who is a hedge fund manager who made $3.5 billion last year. He lives in New Jersey. He's from Pittsburgh, but he lives in New Jersey. I'm thinking when he's up there, how do you make $3.5 billion in 1 year? No, you work real hard to make 50,000 or 100,000. Your money works real hard for you to make $3.5 billion. And yet, there's this audience of 2,000 people, and I think I was probably the only one wondering that. Everybody else was glorifying him. So, I mean, nobody asked him any hard questions. Nobody questioned anything about, the morality of this. This is, of course, I was in a rarefied group, but this is very much part of who we are, and we need to look in the mirror and see if it's okay anymore. And that's why I say I think we're, hitting a tipping point, but I could be completely wrong. And I'm not sure I quite agree with you. I think that the Republican Party has proven very ineffectual, at least at the national level, recently, and they seem to be on a similar trajectory for 2016 of being ineffectual. They talk about creating a big tent on a big umbrella, but there's nobody under that umbrella.
Bruce, did you want to? No. Before we conclude, maybe I would just add one more comment that ends us on a little more optimistic note, since it is rather all very grim. And that is that I can say that, though this is not my area of research, but I do know from my colleagues that ordinary people are much less polarized on these issues than elites. And there's a great deal of shared collective notions among ordinary Americans that something isn't right, and that it's not right for the wealthiest to continue to get wealthier and wealthier and for everyone else to stagnate. So there's a lot of consensus on that, and I think there's a real opportunity for whichever political party wants to take that up to really gain some traction and change some rules and make some real differences on some of the basic rules that can spread wealth around in a more equitable fashion. So a minor optimistic